Day 871 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at the Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 559,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,320 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 7 tanks, 32 APVs, 46 artillery, and 1 air defense system. And as for a percentage update, well, you could now say this looks like Christmas in July. So, as for these updates, I certainly won't be able to explain all of this today, but suffice it to say, it's back by popular demand, in version 2 beta form. Therefore, with the caveat or disclaimer that the calculations for these figures is not entirely set in stone, instead with rough estimate guides at this stage that may need to be adjusted accordingly as necessary. So with the disclaimer out of the way, as a reminder, the yellow figures on the left are based on conservative estimate calculations. The yellow figures on the right, all with green in the middle, a much simpler calculation, a guiding average of the two adjacent numbers. Now, here's the deal. So, in the current form, some of these figures might hit 100%, meanwhile, others will never get the chance to. And that's kind of the point, really, because as Russia continues to overextend itself with military resource utilization, then every single day it leads Russia closer to being without a key aspect of their military, thereby significantly degrading their capacity to wage war. Therefore, this is almost like a bingo card. You only need one of these hardware types to hit 100%, or near enough to it, which then forces a significant strain on the rest of the Russian military to compensate for its own shortfalls. But there are outliers in all of this. For instance, artillery. As those Soviet stockpiles run deep, like this most recent not-fit-for-purpose old Soviet M46 towed artillery piece, spotted just yesterday. And I'll mention more about this absolute banger of a piece shortly, again in the video. Then headed to the map inside of Russia, as over the weekend in Krasnodar, a production facility was on fire, with the surface area of the fire being 5,000 square meters or roughly 1¼ acres. Not much word on the cause, but unlikely a coincidence given how common an occurrence this type of event is these days. Then also over the weekend, Ukraine's security service, or the SBU, reportedly carried out successful drone strikes against an oil depot near Tsimlansk, in Russia's Rostov Oblast, roughly 350 kilometers from the front lines. Footage of the attack showed multiple storage tanks at the facility engulfed in flames. Local sources reported that the fire burned for over 7 hours. And while Russian ground personnel were there on the scene, they were equipped with anti-drone weapons or electronic warfare arms, which are already known to have limited effectiveness on long-range Ukrainian drones due to frequency hopping, communication encryption, autonomous navigation systems as well, and other various inbuilt EW protection incorporated into these platforms. Also worthy of a mention on this front is how the altitude and speed decreases the signal-to-noise ratio, which can make it more difficult to maintain a jam-in lock with. Then also for the map, we saw the ultra-curious case of a Russian Shahed attack drone, originally targeting Ukraine, that flew from Russia's Krasnodar region into Ukraine's east, then into Belarusian airspace, then coming out the other end into Russian airspace. This incident, reported by the Belarusian monitoring group Belaruski Gayan, noted that it was also the second of its kind in just the last 2 days. And as for the Ukrainian side, well, Ukrainian Air Force Commander Oligarchs stated that Russia had launched 5 Shahed drones against Ukraine overnight, with 4 shot down in the Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. But the 5th, in this instance, seemed to go on an extended scenic route back to meet its maker with its final fate unknown. Then, meanwhile on the map, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko announced the withdrawal of his troops from the Ukrainian border, as reported by state-owned news agency Belta. This decision comes after a period of heightened tensions that began in late June when Belarus reinforced its border security due to alleged security incidents. So now Lukashenko claims that the situation has been stabilized, stating that Ukraine had also withdrawn its forces from the shared border, as he asserted that tensions had been removed and that Belarus no longer faces complications with Ukraine. But at the same time, China and Belarus have performed joint military exercises named Eagle Assault near the country's very southwest city of Brest, close to the Polish border. The exercises were described by Belarusian authorities as a response to Western aggressive foreign policy and alleged Ukrainian provocations. So some slightly mixed messages there. And so on the China perspective, it's quite clear to also state this exercise as being an opportunity for China to demonstrate the expansion of its influence in the region, all as part of China's strategy to send its military forces abroad, which works in China demonstrating its expeditionary capabilities, thus demonstrating force near these borders, showing that it's willing to act on the international scene to strengthen its foreign policy agenda. Then moving nearby to the main map today, as Ukraine's military intelligence chief, Bordanov, warned of an imminent Russian attack on Ukraine from the north. In an interview with the NV news outlet, Bordanov stated that the threat is absolutely real and already underway, though he refrained from specifying whether the offensive would target Sumy or Chernihiv oblasts. However, he emphasized that while there is no catastrophe, the situation is deteriorating and cannot be ignored. Then to that other northern front, as most recently Ukrainian airstrikes were seen taking effect on Russian positions at Hliboka on the Kharkiv front. And also over the weekend, so far it doesn't appear that the Russian army on either northern front was able to regain their recently lost positions. In fact, early reports as of just a couple of hours ago suggest that the AFU made a further advance in the city of Vovchansk, which seems to add a city block of progression around there. Then headed much further down on the map, as the pro-Ukrainian Atesh Partisan group carried out sabotage operations near Aleshki on the occupied left bank of Kherson, setting fire to 3 Russian trenches, a weapons cache, and a food depot, destroyed all in the process there as well. Which is somewhat unexpected, showing that the Atesh group is starting to carry out bigger operations. Then also in the area, we saw an almost artistic shot of a destroyed Russian Mr. S self-propelled howitzer, also right there on the left bank of the Kherson region. Although I was unable to identify if this was related to, or as a result of, the Atesh activities in the region. Then swinging back up on the map to Kyiv, or at least Russian news related to Kyiv, as the press director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Maria Zakharova, claimed that Kyiv is preparing to destroy the Kyiv hydroelectric power dam. I highly doubt it. Perhaps instead this is Russia inadvertently admitting to preparing to perform such an action themselves, something which is a clear breach of the Geneva Convention. Then taking a look around the map, because somewhere in the east we saw another Russian turtle tank on the base of a T-62, destroyed by the 108th Territorial Defense Brigade of Ukraine, who are known to operate in the southeast. Then we saw another destroyed Russian Mr. S SPG, this one presumably in the Luhansk region. Then also in the east, a destroyed Russian Tor M2 air defense system somewhere at the front. These air defense losses are getting pretty ridiculous for Russia at this stage. Then headed across to some news, and starting with a bit of a hardware news update, as we most recently saw some tests of the Ukrainian jet-powered UAV interceptor Bullet. Designed specifically to detect, track, and neutralize other UAVs, these interceptors are equipped with various technologies to jam, disable, or destroy hostile drones. Then in some more news, Czech President Petr Pavel announced that the Czech Republic will send 50,000 additional rounds of ammunition to Ukraine in July and August, followed by 80 to 100,000 rounds per month from September through December. This is part of Prague's larger plan to supply approximately 1.2 million rounds of mostly large caliber artillery shells to Ukraine in 2024, which was founded by a large number of countries as a means to purchase already existing shells from anonymous suppliers around the world. Then to some Russian hardware news updates, as a video appeared on Russian Telegram channels of a Kamaz truck with an old 1940s M46 artillery piece headed towards Ukraine. Now, the M46 is an early Cold War era towed 130mm towed howitzer of the Soviet origin, and is for a caliber that Russia no longer produces, leading to Russia using some very dangerously old ammunition with which to support this type of deployment. Now, earlier to this, Russia avoided reactivation of the M46s despite having around 600 pieces in stock, as per open source reports. So the change of heart to start using such a platform is clearly less of a choice and more of a desperate measure due to desperate times. They call for it. We also saw some come by rail too. Now, it's also true that the Russian army pulled out these in very limited volumes quite a while ago, roughly just half a dozen or so at the time. But I'm guessing that due to poor quality and low levels of supplies on the ammunition front, they quickly realized at the time that it simply wasn't fit for purpose. I wonder what they'll learn this time. Then in some more news, yesterday, North Korea's foreign ministry issued a strong rebuke to NATO's recent Washington summit declaration, threatening, quote, tougher strategic counteraction in response to perceived threats. Pyongyang rejected the declaration as illegal, with the always nuclear-threatening hermit kingdom of North Korea accusing NATO of being the primary threat to global peace and security. Oh, the irony. But perhaps the more vocal North Korea we see now is just part of their newfound duties, given that new strategic partnership they signed with Russia. Then to a super quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. And this one happened on Friday. A Russian recon drone reportedly flew into an area to get a closer inspection of activity it noticed at a river somewhere in the Kherson region. And although it didn't turn out to be a Ukrainian military threat, possibly a threat nonetheless, as Kherson fishermen discombobulated the Russian drone by throwing a well-aimed fish at it. Truly a champion effort by these fishermen. So that's it for today, guys. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!